This conference will now be recorded.
So welcome to today's webinar. It's July 17th, 2020, and we're going to talk about our companions who are very important to us and what we need to think about to care for them when either we are incapacitated and unable to do that, or our pets and our companions have outlived us. So for those of you who may not recognize the woman in the picture, this is Leona Helmsley and her dog whose name was Trouble. And she was a multi-millionaire. Her husband was probably a billionaire. She spent the last few years of her life in federal prison for tax evasion. But one of the things she's probably most known for is that in her estate plan, she created a pet trust for Trouble so that he would be taken care of. And there was quite a large sum of money provided for his care, including veterinary services, food, paying the caretaker, paying the trustee. And I'm hoping today that people will start to understand that these are not just issues that affect the wealthy, they affect every one of us. And because for many of us, our pets are part of our family, our children grow up with them. Sometimes they are companions to older adults after a spouse has passed away. That this is something that anybody of any age, of any financial status, can plan for. Now, believe it or not, animals are considered property under the law, and that's what allows us to create these pet trusts for us. I found it very interesting looking at some surveys that 68% of households have a pet of some sort, whether it be a dog, a cat, a fish, or something else. So who is your devoted companion? Who is that animal that makes you smile, that brings joy to you, that makes you forget about anything that happened during the day, especially things that maybe upset you, and just allow you to focus on that unconditional love? Well, one of my family's companions is our German Shepherd Blue, who's here in the picture with our daughter when she was much younger. And so Florida actually was one of the leading states in the country that first created a law allowing pet trusts to be created. We actually go back to 2006, so we've had this around for a very long time. So as I was saying, think about the possibility that certain animals that have a long life expectancy could potentially outlive you. And if you care as much about them as the time that you devote to making sure they have quality of life, quality of care, then you're going to want to also plan for their future when you might not be here. Now, I wasn't surprised completely to find out that cats have a very long life expectancy. One of our last cats lived to almost 21 years of age. And dogs, depending on their breed, their size, genetics, can live anywhere from 10 to 13 years. For those people who are fans of the equine species, horses can live 25 to 30 years. And if you're a bird lover, certain types of birds can also live 20 to 30 years. So it's very possible that our companions might just outlive us. For those of you who are curious about the photograph, this is a photo I took a few years back when we were visiting New York City and we spent a few hours at the Central Park Zoo. This is a red panda. So we're going to walk step by step, and the steps you'll see are very simple that will help you plan your pet trust. So step number one is to identify a caregiver. Who will you trust with your beloved companion? Now, depending on what kind of companion you have, you want to think about whether the caregiver has a home that can accommodate your beloved companion. For example, if you happen to have a barn on your property and you have horses, your caregiver may or may not have a barn as well. So you might have to look to a place where you can keep the horse, but still allow the caregiver you selected to oversee the care of the animal. Because we don't have a crystal ball and nobody can predict how long your caregiver will live, or will your caregiver have any kind of health issues that might interfere with their ability to be the caregiver to your companion, it's also important to name a successor or an alternate caregiver. And this is the concept that we talk about with people when we're talking about a power of attorney or a healthcare surrogate. We always say have an alternate, at least one, if not two. And that way, if something unforeseen occurs, whether it be a health issue, a disability, an unexpected death, the plan doesn't fall apart. The plan continues to be able to manage the care of your beloved animal. Once you have selected the caregiver and the alternate caregiver, please make sure to have a conversation with those people as opposed to this coming as a surprise to them when you're sick or after you've passed away. It's always best to have an open dialogue and invite the individual to be honest with you as to whether this is something they feel that they can take on. Once you've received the confirmation that the people you would like to name are willing to serve as caregiver and alternate caregiver, you want to be thinking about compensation to the caregiver. So is there an expectation on the part of the caregiver that they will be paid for overseeing the care of your pet? If they do have an expectation and you're able to provide financial remuneration, you have a couple of choices. For example, you could decide to pay them a flat rate each month that covers everything that they're going to do, whether or not the animal is healthy or the animal becomes sick or there's a need to go to the vet that month. It would also include all the care that you provide to your pet. Now, as far as how payment is made, there are choices with that as well. And that may be dependent on the financial needs of your caregiver, whether they need to be paid weekly, bi-weekly, once a month. So this is something to talk to your caregiver about, and that way this becomes part of the written pet trust. The clearer the instructions are, the easier it's going to be for the person you name as the trustee to carry out your plan. Now, for those of you who are wondering, why is there a cat in the photograph wearing angel wings? This is what happens when you have a young child and it's holiday time and the guests have not arrived and the child is bored and looking forward to opening up presents. Step 2, it's important for you to document the care that you provide and the quality of life that you want your companion to have when you're no longer able to provide that yourself. So for example, if you have a dog, you would want to document how many times a day do you walk the dog? Is it just simply going outside the house to go to the bathroom? Or do you have a routine of walking your pet around the neighborhood? Or is there a favorite park, a dog park, that you like to take your animal? So the things that only you know need to be passed on so that the caregiver and the trustee both know what's important to the life of your pet. Think also about the brand of food that you buy. Some pets have certain dietary needs or perhaps allergies that you've become aware of by your vet. Maybe you've even had to try a couple of different brands before you find the food that is best for your dog, your cat, or any other companion. So it's important to document the brand of food as well as any special dietary needs of the animal. If your animal takes any kind of medication or a diagnosis, it's important that you include that in your written plan as well. Exercise is an important part of our lives, so it's equally important to our pets. We want our pets to stay healthy and we want them to have quality of life. So think about spelling out what kind of exercise you provide to your animal. Do you, for example, have a fenced-in yard where you let the dog out? Do you let the cat out in your backyard that's a self-enclosed screen around the pool? What is unique to the animals that you care for? You also want to talk about visits to the veterinarian. And what I mean is any visits other than annual checkups, for example, maybe a rabies vaccination, something like that. My vet, for example, Dr. Lozier, is a holistic vet, and she has been trained to do rehabilitation for injured animals. So that would be something that I would put in my pet trust for our dog because our dog had hip replacement surgery in October last year. Our vet is also trained to do acupuncture, and we have found that as our animals age, there's the tendency that many of them develop arthritis, and we have found that they get a lot of comfort from the arthritis with the acupuncture. So those are examples that I would include of visits to the veterinarian. It's also important to think about habits. You know, we live with our animals 24 hours a day, and we see things that other people don't necessarily see or notice. So for example, does your pet like children? If you live alone and there are no children in the house, it's possible that your pet may or may not be receptive to being with a family that has young children. So these are all things to contemplate when you're developing your plan to create your pet trust. And I'm sure many of us spend money during the year, whether we shop online or we're able to go to a pet store, where we buy favorite toys or blankets for our pets. So if those things are important, if this is something that is part of your pet's routine, think about including that in your plan. Step 3 is to identify a trustee. Now, a trustee is different than the caregiver. The caregiver, as I said, is the person that is going to be with the pet, is going to live with the pet and take care of the pet. They're going to do the food shopping, they're going to take the pet to the veterinarian. Whereas the trustee is the person who actually oversees and administers the pet trust. They will be the ones that financially handle the money that you have left in the trust. They will take care of paying the veterinarian bills and compensating the caregiver. Now it's up to you whether or not you'd like the same individual to serve as both the caregiver and the trustee. They don't have to be the same person. And so if you have somebody that you trust, that you perhaps have named in your own legal documents to be your power of attorney or be personal representative of your will, but maybe they are not the right person to take care of your companion, then maybe you want to name them as the trustee and somebody that you best know is a lover of animals to be the caregiver. We discussed earlier the importance of always naming an alternate fiduciary, just in case the first person we name can't do it, something happens that we didn't anticipate. And here the same advice applies. It's good to name the successor trustee. What if your first trustee gets sick and has to resign? Or what if they pass away at an earlier age than was expected? So having the successor allows our management plan to continue to work, and it does not stop or falter. When you do sit down with the person or the people you want to name as trustee and successor trustee, do have a conversation with them and explain to them that you would want them to check in on the caregiver and your companion, make sure that the animal is being well taken care of, do any kind of inspection that they feel is necessary. You know, we certainly want to make sure that the dog isn't being tied up to a fence in the middle of the Florida summer heat. And so it's important that the trustee understand that they do have duties other than overseeing the funds and making payments. So think in terms of how often you would want the trustee to visit the caregiver and your pet. Now, as I said to you earlier, the earlier picture of our family cat whose name is Buddha, and my husband is always saying, "Why did you name him Buddha? He's not yet enlightened." This was also taken the night back in December as we were waiting for guests, and my daughter was bored and so excited about it being the holiday that she decided to take a boa and decorate the cat. So now we're up to step 4 on how to plan for your pet trust. So you want to determine how much money to fund the trust with. And this takes into consideration several factors. The first is to estimate what do you spend per year on the cost of food. Now there could be a difference between buying a brand that you get at Walmart or Publix versus something that might be prescriptive because of a dietary requirement or a medical condition of your pet. You also want to be thinking about the cost on average of veterinarian services. So we know what the annual visit usually looks like. If you have the need to take your pet more than once a year, whether it be for therapies, for acupuncture, laser, anything else, you want to include that in your estimate. The third factor to consider is, again, what is the quality of life you have been providing to your pet that you want to continue? What does that picture look like? What does it involve? You might also need to ask the caregiver, do they travel? Do they anticipate going on a vacation once or twice a year? If the answer to the question is yes, you also want to consider that the caregiver is going to need to hire a person or a company to watch the pet either in their home when they're on vacation or to bring the animal to the vet or to a boarding company to take care of the pet while the caregiver is away. So those are some other expenses to factor in. And then, of course, we can only estimate, but we do want to look at how old the pet currently is and what's the average life expectancy of the animal. So take into consideration these 4 primary factors to help you determine how much to fund the trust, in addition to what you will be compensating the caregiver. Step 5 requires us to think far into the future and to plan for that time when our animal, like us, is going to pass away. So it's important to let the caregiver and the trustee know in the pet trust document whether you would like your companion to be buried or cremated, and to include this in the estimate we were just discussing of what you're going to fund the pet trust with. It's equally important to think about the possibility that the assets in the trust might outlive your companion. So should there be any monies remaining, you want to designate a beneficiary to receive the remaining assets. And you have many different choices. This is entirely up to each person. There is no requirement under the law. You can leave it to a person, you can leave it to a charity, you can leave it to a combination of people and a charity. This is your decision, where you get to design the pet trust that is going to give the companion you love the quality of life that you've been providing. I know some clients I've worked with have decided to distribute any remaining assets left in the trust to a charity that has as its primary goal the care of animals, such as either a no-kill shelter or perhaps the national or the state level or even county level animal control. Sometimes people have designated charities that will take care of endangered wildlife or endangered species that somehow make their way into our state. So there's many different options to choose from, and not only provide for the well-being of your animal, but have far-reaching effects to potentially help other animals as well. Now, although we've been very focused on planning for when we pass away and our companions outlive us, the reality is that we are living longer today in this country, and there is the possibility that we might be incapacitated and unable to take care of the day-to-day needs of our beloved pets. We might be lucky to move into a community, an assisted living facility, for example, that allows pets, but we might need the help of a caregiver to take care of that pet. So my tip for you today is to include language in your durable power of attorney or your revocable trust agreement that gives specific instructions to your fiduciary to provide for the care of your pet. For example, you may want to say in the document that it's your preference that your pet go with you to the independent living or to the assisted living community. You also want to include in the document the caregiver and to indicate that you need the visits. You know, a cat will be much simpler to care for, but a dog is going to need to go out and be walked. So you want to also address the fact that while you're alive but incapacitated, that you are giving permission for your own assets to be used to care for your pet as well as for you. And that way it provides the management plan for your companion, and it provides clear instructions for your fiduciary that they in fact do have permission to use the funds to care for your pet. So at this time, I'd like to invite anybody who has a question to either unmute their microphone and share the question, or you're welcome to type your question into the chat box and I will read it out loud and then answer the question. So I welcome everybody to join me next week. We ordinarily have our weekly webinars on Fridays, but next week we are hosting it on Thursday, July 23rd, 2020 at 12:30 p.m. And the topic next week is how elder law and special needs attorneys help people diagnosed with chronic illnesses. You can go to my firm's website to the events calendar page, select the webinar, fill out a very short registration form, and receive the GoToMeeting link. You can also view past webinars that have been recorded and register to receive the link to see those as well. I do see that we have a question in the chat box. Are the PowerPoint available? The answer is yes. The recordings are interactive, so it provides the PowerPoint, the audio, as well as a typed transcript of the webinar. And if you haven't been to the website, I encourage you to visit and go to the page where you can register to receive a complimentary legal documents checklist, which people find very helpful to help them focus and plan for estate planning. And you'll also receive a gift certificate for a 20% discount on the consultation. So I want to thank everybody for making time to join me today. Please stay healthy and well, and I look forward to you joining me next week. Thank you.